Hey, Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I am Indola, and this is my co-host for this month.
My name is Ayub.
Ayub. This is my husband, the other half of the face you've been seeing for the last month. And welcome to our Pre-Ramadan series. So as we were working through the Black History Month series, we started thinking about what's the next thing that we needed to look at, to talk about, and get through. And we decided that Ramadan was the next big thing that's coming up in our lives. And so instead of waiting for Ramadan, we decided to put together a pre-Ramadan series. And so every week for the month of March, we will be coming on Mondays and Fridays at 7 p.m. On Mondays, we will be joined by men, brothers in our extended community. And on Fridays, we'll be joined by women. And the topic for this month is the importance of the Muslim family. And so every single week, we're going to be talking about the importance of the Muslim family. And each week has its own unique theme. So this very first week, the theme is oneself. So we're going to be talking about oneself and how ourselves as individuals are important in the broader scheme of a Muslim family. We're going to look at it from us growing up, us as individuals, us as brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and all those types of things, but the individual aspect of that. Whether you're married or unmarried, there are a lot of things that we have to do as individuals that contribute to our families. And so we're going to start off this week with our brother Khalil Ismail, who is here waiting. He's ready to come on and share all this good information with everybody. And so definitely join us every single Monday and Friday, 7 p.m. here on the Shakors. And I think we're ready to bring brother Ishmael on in. Hey, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, family. What's good? What's good?
Nothing much.
Not much, alhamdulillah.
How you doing?
I'm great, alhamdulillah. Great.
So we're gonna start off giving you a more proper introduction. So Khalil Ismail, who we have with us, music may be what Khalil does, but it is far from what defines him. Khalil is a husband and father of 5. He spends much of his time strategizing and working to better serve Black marginalized populations in Baltimore City. He served as a house manager and resident counselor for 5 years at a women's homeless shelter, and currently mentors inner city youth, which I've been privileged to see some of that, and it's amazing. So he mentors inner city youth. He's teaching them how to tell their story using media. He has lectured at major universities such as Princeton, Johns Hopkins, and Cornell on various social topics, particularly pertaining to race and justice. His dedication to the betterment of humanity is actually what fuels his creative work. In 2020, Khalil Ismail launched a unique creative life coaching initiative called KI Living. So before we jump into the oneself stuff, you want to expand on any of that? Because that was a lot.
Actually, the way that I'm gonna expand is I'm gonna introduce my family here, because y'all like my favorite families. So
here we go. Right.
We have Indola, who is multifaceted. Actually multifaceted in many ways, where she is both a poet, spoken word artist, writer, very educated, does homeschool, led a homeschool, leads a whole homeschool co-op, and so much more. And we have Ayub, who is a money man, but also he is a boss, and nobody knows it. He's the mob boss. He is the boss of pretty much, like, he runs Atlanta, but he'll never let you know. So I just wanted to expand that way. Thank you, fam. Y'all really are my fam, so love y'all, man.
You're unprepared for the return. You're so unprepared.
That's my expansion. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, well then let's jump in. So we, as he said, we do know him personally, And when we sat down and made a list of people we wanted to invite on and kind of spread out over the month, we decided to bring you in for this one for a lot of reasons. And one of which is because of the work that you do, helping people build themselves. Not just this work with marginalized communities, but with people in general, whether it's young people, old people, whatever. And we felt like we wanted to have a voice that could reach different generational levels, right?
Yeah.
So even though we're probably in the same generation, I think it still is something with someone who's been doing this work, and so that's why we asked you for this particular one. So to jump right in, do you want to start us off, or you want me to start?
Yeah, I think all of us have different stories as far as coming into adulthood, like, when you actually leave the nest, right? And so I wanted us all to kind of expound on, just for a brief moment, like how was that process discovering yourself when you finally left the nest? And we'll start with you, Khalil.
When I left the nest, subhanAllah. So I think, because I left the nest actually when I got right around the time I got married. Actually, when I first got married to my wife, and now it's been 17 years, subhanAllah, I was when I left. And when we first got started, actually, it was like we started like 50-50. I was a data entry clerk. I had no idea who I was going to be, who I am today at all whatsoever. One, I thank her for taking the chance and allowing me to start 50-50. After a year or so, I was able to take over the rest of the bills and that type of thing. It was important to me. And really after that, man, it's just been a crazy, crazy ride. I mean, if I was to give you like, I would say one encapsulation of it, I would say that, I went from, kind of wanting to be some type of basketball player overseas. It's probably, you probably want to be. We were both shooters like that. We shot very well. And that's one thing. We was always shooters on our team. So, right. So, so that was, I remember transitioning from realizing that hoop dreams wasn't really going to be my thing to, okay, what am I going to do? Right. And so I started out kind of working data entry at like this place called the Maryland Food Bank, but I actually became an entrepreneur at that place. I went to school and college at the same time, and I learned about entrepreneurship there. And so, I think that was really kind of the start, I guess, of the start of adulthood. And I don't know if you can, you know what I'm saying? We can get more specific with specific questions you ask, because, it's a lot, I guess I can say.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think that I never had aspirations as far as just playing professional basketball necessarily. I just really loved the game. But it was like when I graduated from college, it was like, all right, life is supposed to happen now. What do I want to do? So alhamdulillah, we had, some family businesses that I actually were able to work full time in for a number of years. And so then one of the biggest, most important things to me was starting a family. And so, started that. And it wasn't scary, but it was like, you don't know what's about to happen.
Yeah.
You don't know what's about to happen, but it's just like life is supposed to start happening where I have to gain responsibility for myself. And coming from the type of family that I've come from, it was like to be able to take care of yourself and not have your family be dependent upon you was such a big thing for me, and so to be able to play that role in my family where it was like Ayub was the dependable one, and Ayub is not going to have to ask for much, right? Yeah. You can go to Ayub if you need something. And so that was something that I started early on, and alhamdulillah, I'm here now. But that, like you said, we'll unpack some more stuff, as we go. And Dola, what you got?
Yeah, so my voyage into adulthood was it was a bit tumultuous. I moved out rather abruptly when I was 19, and of course my parents were not okay with it. But I just was like, I really, really, really got to do this. And so I got a small apartment near. I was going to Georgia State. Got a small apartment in Georgia State, and when I say small, I mean 500 square feet, maybe.
Yeah.
Small, and it wasn't even a studio. They had the nerve to put walls up in that thing. But it was a very small one-bedroom apartment where I could walk to school. But for those people who don't know about that area, back in the 2001, it wasn't the kind of space where you would want your 19-year-old daughter walking by herself to and from school. So it was kind of like a big controversy in our family. Like, you know, I was kind of that one always doing something. And alhamdulillah, things have mended since. Of course, my parents and I have a good relationship now. But doing that, I thought that I was grown because I was grown. And then I remember getting late notices in the mail like, oh, this isn't paid. I'm like, oh, I paid my rent, but I didn't pay my electric bill. Or I paid my electric bill, but I didn't pay my phone bill. Or I budgeted for food, but I didn't budget for toilet paper. Or whatever things. And so I kind of threw myself on into the deep end but by my own choice. And I also was a little bit stubborn. So once I did it, I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm gonna figure this out. And so I ended up getting a job on campus, and I got a job at the same place my dad worked and a job on campus, and used a lot of my financial aid money to get myself through, keep my bills paid. And I just kind of thugged it out, so to speak, until I decided that I wanted to get married. And then I was like, nah, men ain't nothing. I ain't getting married. Forget men. And then as soon as I was like, I'm not getting married, somebody came along. And I ended up married by the end of that year.
You said I ain't trying to hear that.
Right. It was funny. Anybody who was around back then would randomly send me a text like, remember that time when you said you wasn't getting married and now you got 3 kids? So it was interesting, the journey that I was on with myself, and how much of it I was unaware I was really on. And it took a lot of other stuff to come up for me to really come to terms with what was going on with me at the time, and why I moved out, and why I didn't want to get married, and all these other things. And a lot of our personal stories is what led us to want to start with Oneself. Initially, we were going to start with marriage. And then I was like, that feels like a disservice to the series. Like, there are things before marriage. What led us to marriage? And I'll never forget when we decided that we wanted to be married. I was like, we should, I don't know if it was me or him. One of us said premarital counseling, but we were both for it. And when we were doing the premarital counseling, at a certain point, our counselor was like, you know, you need therapy, right? Like, you by yourself. And I was like, me? What's wrong with me? And he was like, wow. Oh, wow, it's so much. And I was just like, dang. So he would give me my own homework.
Wow.
For me, in addition to the premarital homework. And that's probably the first time that I did like self-work in terms of me, myself, like not as a daughter, not as a potential spouse, not as anything, but like you by yourself have things that you need to address for you. No one can do it but you. You got to work on yourself. Because truth be told, I thought that I was fine. You know, from being honest, I was like, I'm cool. Yeah, I'm mean sometimes, but I'm chilling, or I'm fine. You know, but that experience was the start of so many things, and it was the first time that I really started to see the major flaws in myself, I guess is the best way to put it. Besides normal insecurities of, you know, you might feel some kind of way about your weight or your size or your whatever growing up, your name, your hair, whatever. Actual things with Indola, like, oh, this is not so great, or there's a trauma here, or you need to address this. It wasn't until a therapist pointed out to me that I had that work that I needed to do. And we've been kind of on the therapy journey ever since, huh?
Yeah, ever since. And I think that, you know, it kind of transitions into another thought I was just having, is just that at what point was it that I really had to do some self-reflection and really attack the things that I knew that I shouldn't be doing and that I needed to fix, right? Prior to thinking about getting married, right? Prior to even that thought process, and as far as being an adult, right? And somebody of responsibility, like, what was that? For me personally, it was a matter of I was getting the reminders, so I knew better. You know, I was putting myself in a different environment where I was constantly being reminded of the type of person that I wanted to be and that I needed to be. What was that process like for you?
You know, it's funny, you know, because it's funny. She was saying that And actually, just to note, I think that, it's a good idea for everybody actually to try to get some therapy before they get married, especially the first time. But then after you get married, especially after you get married too, because if it ends up working, because I said the pretty part of the story early, but the truth is that I was married. The first time I got married, it was actually in the household. I was one of those people who I was allowed to get married in the household. 18 or so, you know what I'm saying? And that didn't work out, you know what I'm saying? And I think it actually it affected me a lot, right? It affected me, and, I'm a person who cares deeply about whatever I'm going to do. I'm going to go all out. So, when you go all out or whatever, it's always going to be, when there's the aftermath of going all out, it's going to be, you're going to have to kind of go over that. I never really got a chance to go over that. So, I could see how that type of thing affected me later. Alhamdulillah, Allah bless me, kind of being a person who I was, just very self-reflective, you know what I'm saying, about trying to do better. But I think that, when you ask that, you say, what was the thing that, made me kind of be like, okay, I now have to do self-reflection and do better. To be honest, like, I think the thing, if to be real here, to be honest, I think it's important, especially in this day and age, for people to really understand what's out here. I think the biggest thing that I had to make sure I let go before I got married is that I was exposed, like at 12 years old, I was exposed to pornography, honestly, by somebody who was unsuspecting, right? Not somebody who was unsuspecting. My parents were unsuspecting. I was at a friend's home and they had a video cassette tape. And they put it in. I was never exposed to it in my own household because they were careful. But it was this Arab dude, you know what I'm saying? He put the tape in and all that stuff. And I remember looking at that stuff and having a problem kind of dealing with that early on. But I knew I was wrong. I knew I was wrong because my father had kind of taught me about what was right. He was one of those people who told the truth about things. I really appreciate that, because I think if he didn't talk about stuff, like he didn't talk about things, it would have been something maybe I wouldn't even have thought was that wrong. Yeah. So I remember that being the first fight and battle that I overcame, that I had to overcome, you know what I'm saying, before I was to actually get in an arrangement. But I think that therapy probably would have helped me in terms of getting over it faster and getting over whatever the scars or the lingering effects of it was. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It would have helped me after that. So I think that if I'm gonna bring in one thing, that was the thing that I feel like, okay, you know what? I knew I had to get over. I was determined to get over, because I believe in Allah. I knew it was right, but it was difficult because for a second after that, it was a little difficult to get rid of, because it was just like there's this thing, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was a little teenager, young little boy. You know what I mean? Yeah, so that. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So that was that was something that I think I definitely should say, just because of what's out here today and what people are probably dealing with on a much even more difficult level today.
Yeah. What about you?
I think that I was always kind of an odd child, and I knew that I was different from other people. I didn't really know why. I just knew that I wasn't like other people. Aside from the fact that we was in the West End and my name was Ndola, so that was kind of a thing. Like, your name is what? Oh, y'all some African booty scratchers or something? Like, people really used to say that. Like, bitch is crazy. But at any rate, I remember by the time I was 10 was the first time that we traveled internationally, and we went to West Africa. So we went to Morocco, and then layover in Mauritania, then we went to Senegal, then we went to Gambia. And so we did that in like 2 weeks' time, came back to America. And then within 6 months of that, my parents got divorced. My mom closed her school, and we moved to Senegal. And by then, I guess I was closer to 11, maybe 10 and a half. I think the first time I went, I was actually 9. It was right before I turned 10. It was in December, and my birthday was in a couple of months. So now I was 10 and a half when we made that move. And I remember the divorce was very shocking because my parents, like, we had never even heard them argue or fight or anything. It was kind of like everything was cool, and then they was divorced, and then we left. And it was 5 of us growing up. And I'm in the middle. I'm the third of 5. So my 2 older sisters, who have both graduated high school, stayed in America. And I went from being in the middle to the oldest. and overseas in a new place with new smells and new language with my younger brother, my younger sister. And so the reflection that I did was more about how do I step into this space than anything for me. Like, how do I be the oldest now? Like, now I'm the one that's the oldest. I'm in charge. I have to protect. I have to whatever. And, I don't know how well I did at it because I didn't communicate verbally much. I may have cracked jokes and talked to people, but I wasn't comfortable like sharing my feelings. So I used to keep a journal, and that's actually what got me into writing poetry, finding ways to express myself. And at some point during that time, I came to realize, I think it was about a year later, I was like, I feel like I need like a religion, like something to guide me more, because I don't think I'm doing a good job. So I started studying religions, and I looked at Judaism. I looked at Judaism for a minute, and Judaism was actually pretty dope, but there were too many gaps for me. It was a lot of things, a lot of questions I had that weren't answered, and I didn't really like the interplay of men and women. And I knew I didn't want to be Christian because I didn't believe in the Trinity. And so that part didn't work. And then, and at that point, I knew I didn't want to be Muslim because a lot of the Muslims I knew, honestly, I felt like I had better character than they did. And it wasn't really much more to it than that. But I was in a place where Muslims were being sent for kind of like a rehabilitation kind of thing. And, I'm 11, so I don't know why people are where they are. I just know that there was a lot of people with not so great behavior. And I was like, well, these Muslims, they're a little questionable. I know I don't want to be Christian because I don't believe this stuff. Judaism isn't cutting it. So what can I be? And somebody who I became very good friends with, his name is Usman Dimson. He heard me say that one day, and he was like, wait, why? You don't want to be Muslim? Nah, that's not okay. Let me tell you what Islam is. Let me tell you what Muslims are. And we used to just talk at school every single day. He was like, throw them at me. Ask me all your questions. If I don't have the answer, I'll find it. And during that process is when I first did any real self-evaluation, because I was trying to figure out who I was and what I needed, like spiritually. I knew I needed something. And during this time, I was performing Islam, but I didn't know Islam. I didn't understand it to really say that I was Muslim or not. And I'll never forget one day, it was during Ramadan. And he was like, all right, lay it on me, what you got? And it dawned on me that I didn't have any more questions. I was like, I think you've answered them all. And he was like, so now what you waiting for? And I was like, I don't know, nothing. And I took my shahada that Friday. Last Friday in Ramadan, my 13th birthday was a few days later. It was for Eid. My very first Eid was my 13th birthday. My first Ramadan as a Muslim. And that whole experience was coupled with some really vivid dreams that I still remember to this day. Like I would have the same dream 3 nights in a row or for 3 nights. And then the next week I have it for 3 nights. And once I learned what some of those dreams meant, it was like, oh, snap, like I got some work to do. But mind you, I was 13 at the time. And so I didn't feel like I felt too strange to tell too many people. Like, this is not normal. Like, normal people don't dream like this. Normal people don't at 12 years old say, I need spiritual guidance. Like, I'm really, really strange, because there were other 12-year-olds there who was chilling, sneaking. They were Muslim, let's sneak this water. Let's go behind here and eat these snacks. And I'm like, well, we're supposed to be fasting. So I didn't want to be that guy. I just knew it was something. So during that process of kind of searching and whatever, there was a lot of self-reflection. But the problem was there were a lot of other traumas that were happening that I didn't know were traumas that stopped me from accepting who I was saying that I was. And so so there was a lot of insecurities happening. Of course, puberty is happening around that time. The trauma of even just my parents and the move. Like, that's not, my parents are old fashioned in that, you don't explain yourself to kids, do what I tell you to do. And so by 10, I wasn't asking questions. I had learned a long time ago. You don't ask questions, you just do. Do what you're supposed to do. Even if I'm gonna do it while you're looking and I'm gonna sneak and do something else when you leave, as far as in front of you, I'm just gonna do what I'm told. And so that did lead to more inner reflection and staying quiet about it and only talking to a person here and there. And I think that was probably the biggest thing for a long time, because when I came back to America, I tucked most of that stuff right back on down in the name of fitting in a bit until it didn't work anymore. What about you?
Like I said, I guess for me, mine was, kind of during college. It was a process where I went to a school where I didn't know anybody, literally. My only prerequisite was that they didn't have a football team because I knew football team meant party school. You know what I mean? So it was like, okay, they don't have a football team. I have to go through this process of being comfortable who IU is, right? Nobody knows you. So what you put out and what people like of you and think of you is what you're going to put out. That's it. Right. And so back then, I thought I was coming from Atlanta, going to a country school. I thought I was big stuff. Right. But at the same time, I always had this humility about myself where I was never like conceited and arrogant outwardly. You know what I mean? And so during that time, I really had to, do some reflection and contacting family members about family history and things of that nature. And it was like, okay, Islam is the way that I want to live my life. And so it was no reminders except outside of phone calls from my father sometimes, stuff like that. But everything else had to be on me. It was on me. You know what I mean? And it was like, okay, this is how I really want to live my life. So I have to practice as such, and so, to not have anybody to fast with during Ramadan, having to go to the cafeteria and get your, your iftar food and take it back to the room for later and things of that nature. And you by yourself. But this is the choice that I made because I was fully entrenched in a community of people throughout my whole life and during the summer times where it was like, oh, if you want to fit in, this is what you're gonna do. Right. So it was like, are you doing it for yourself or for the people that you always around? You know what I mean? And so at that time is when I really started to gain a love for it for myself, and that was a crucial period in my life, Yeah.
Very similar college experience that I had where I was the only outward Muslim, where people knew and I didn't mind telling people I was Muslim, because I went to a small I played college at this D3 school called Stevenson University. You know what I mean? And nobody else was Muslim, like at all, right? And I used to be honest, because I didn't necessarily have the money to do dorms. I used to stay with my teammates sometimes. You know what I mean? Sometimes I would stay with my teammates, and then I would go back to the apartment where I was living with my dad, right? And then I'd go back and forth. And I'm gonna be honest, like I think for me, that was definitely it was a similar thing. I was deciding because because there was definitely a lure coming at me one way, especially like you're one of the few black people in that school. I was one of the few black people in that school.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? When you're one of the few black people in schools like that, you know how that goes. And you're a basketball player, you know how that goes, right?
Yeah.
So that was going on, and I remember like having these ups and downs with my dean. Like I did stay away from the partying and stuff like that. I did try to stay away from that, but I remember being exposed to things that I was like growing up Muslim that I didn't even realize was happening until I was on a team. Like when we would travel, you know what I mean? We would travel, and I remember like one time we was in a dorm. And we were playing video games, and all of a sudden I see these women start to walk in. They just sitting over there waiting while we playing video games. I'm like, I'm trying to continue to play, and the dude start looking at me like, "Dude, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Yo, I gotta play another game. I'm not even on the way. Yo, I swear, right?" And then I realized I said, "All right, I'm going back to my room." I remember going back to my room because of what was about to happen after that. And I remember somebody told me later, like, "Yo, what was you doing?" Right? You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, "Man, I didn't know what y'all." I was trying to beat him in NBA Live. You know what I mean? But once I was privy to that, and the thing about that I will say is that it starts out that way. But once you start seeing that over time, you become a little bit numb to it, and that's a danger zone.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a danger zone because it starts out that way, but then after that, it becomes okay now. First it's known, then it's okay. Well, it doesn't. Maybe if I hang with him even during this space, so you have to be careful with that type of thing. So yeah, but I remember making that decision too. I didn't want to be in that. I didn't want to do that. And alhamdulillah, in the last year that I was there, that's when I met my wife and we got married, and that solved a lot of, all of that stuff was, then I was not even, I was off campus, except for when I needed to go to school.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that me and Dodo talk about is different from this current generation and our generation is access to information, right? It's like we had things that sparked our interest as far as movies, music, all kind of stuff, right? But that was it.
Right.
But now you can Google anything, right? And you can find a plethora of information on anything.
Yeah. You could not even be Googling it, but it'll be a nice little side part, like suggested for you.
Yes.
And it's crazy.
And so, you know, how do we because a lot of young people, right, who are going through this same process that we had to go through to decide how they want to live their lives, right?
Yeah.
How do you combat that to tell them that, you know, don't go feeding your nuts, essentially?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To limit the amount that you feed your nuts. How do you suggest that is done?
Well, like I said, first of all, a lot of dua, but then after that,
Straight up.
a lot of dua, but then, you know, we got to strategize and use our minds and brains after that. So one of the things that I've tried to do with my family is we have regular meetings, you know, about, we have certain topics that we talk about, but we always bring it back to a couple of things, shukr, sabr. You know what I'm saying? Between shukr and sabr, you can actually cover everything between those two, between, you know, gratefulness and patience, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So we have these meetings and we talk about everything in life and how it relates to that, right? So one of the things that we try to do is I try in those spaces to try to get them to talk about what's going on with them, you know what I'm saying? And giving them the floor without judging them, right? And then I actually anticipate. I'm like, listen, I know because you're on the internet, I know you've probably seen everything. So I'm not going to play games with you. Like, here, this is, and explains. And then we try to explain this is what it is, and then try to explain the good of what they're seeing as well as the bad. Because I think that one of the things that I feel like maybe I suffer from a little bit, or we suffer from a little bit when we were growing up, is our parents were so zealous about keeping us all away from the bad, right? That they kept us away from some of the good with respect to the bad. Meaning, you have to be able to differentiate, or they're going to like be curious because part of what you're saying isn't true. You know what I'm saying? So maybe some of the things that they're exposed to that is bad. It's not bad because inherently it's bad because of the context.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you get my drift, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Some of these conversations.
What you say?
I said we've had some of these conversations. We do have an official teenager.
Yeah.
And we have one that's right behind, will be 11 soon. And so one of our challenges is teetering between being honest and protecting innocence. Going back and forth between those two things, because I can remember the first time I was exposed to something pornographic. Like, it was a bit shocking. It was jarring. I was overseas. I had taken a trip to Spain and I was 13, and it was just on TV, and I didn't know what it was at first. Right. I'm just flipping through the channels and I'm like, what? I'm getting closer to the TV. Like, what? Oh my God. Because it was just, the angle was crazy. And I didn't tell nobody. I wasn't sure what I saw, but I knew it was something that wasn't so right about it. But I was coming from, that wasn't something my parents had talked to me about. It wasn't that this is bad or this is haram or anything. It was no conversation. And so now that I know my children, when I found out they may have been, it was like, all right, let's sit down and talk. Yeah. But before we sat down and talked, I looked through the history to see what may have they seen, you know, what's this level of exposure. And in the conversation, we're going to be honest, but we're going to still try to preserve some level of innocence here. Like, we're not going to just have this raw conversation like, because they're still young.
Yeah.
And so it's been really interesting because I find that this is a super common issue. Like, it pretty much has hit every household that I've asked about it, but nobody really likes to talk about it. It's like this shame that's over it. Like, it's something that the parent is doing or the child is doing, whether the child looked it up or not. Like he was saying at first, you could have looked up all you want. You wasn't finding nothing. You had to find a tape and a VCR and a private space and a quiet time and sneak away. You know, there were so many things that had to be in place for you to see something when we were younger, versus now you can literally pick up your phone, open the internet browser, and bam, there it is. And so we talk a lot about ways to protect not just our children, but any children, and to protect ourselves, because we might be watching something on YouTube, and then the next video that comes up, you're like, oh snap, the kid next to me, or even just me myself, like I don't want to see this. And so yeah, it's really intensely uncomfortable sometimes to have to deal with these things, but it's also stuff that we gotta deal with.
Yeah, speaking of self, man, and you're talking to self, it's a good thing you bring up regarding us, because I think sometimes as parents, we do take for granted, you know, because we're grown when we're watching stuff, the effect that it has on us.
Yeah.
You know, but it's actually one of the things I've been paying attention to in the last couple of years, even more ever. There's a reason why this stuff is so widespread. There's a reason why it's everywhere. It's the reason why they make it a point to put it in pretty much everything.
Everything.
You know, they know the psychological effects of it. And, you know, one of the things I really started trying to do for myself, and, you know, I'm not even saying I'm perfect at it. It's like, even if I'm scrolling down Instagram, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, if you got Instagram, you can press that little not interested thing, because they'll start, if you're doing it on an Explorer, I actually started making it a habit to do that, because what happens is that once it becomes easy for you to look at, you know what I'm saying? Next thing you know, you can just be looking and then just, oh, you know what? Let me look a little further. This looks a little better than I anticipated. You know what I'm saying? If I'm just honest. And you never know what that leads to. And that's the point. That's the point that they're trying to, like, this is how Shaitan works. Shaitan actually works from a trickle effect standpoint. We view the devil as this, you know, this red horn. They told us that the devil was this big red horn, ugly dude. When actually the devil actually paints things very pretty and puts them in really pretty packages, and then says, it's not that bad. You just, all it is Instagram. You can look for a couple seconds. You don't gotta like it. You don't even gotta like it. You know what I'm saying? And the next thing you know, you're down a rabbit hole, right? And even what it's doing. So what I realize, I'm like, you know, as I start to really think about just what are the smaller ways, or not only small, the subtle ways that I can obey Allah, I'm like, whatever Allah says, when He says it, it means it's really weighty. So Allah says, lower your gaze, and I'm like, that means something. That actually, because Allah doesn't actually prohibit us with a lot of things, especially in Quran. There's some things that are, you know, that are more nuanced. But this is one of those things where He's saying, and the women and the men, right? He's saying, He's talking to both of them, right? And it's the same. It's the same with both of them, the women and the men, lower your gaze. So what happens when it becomes easy for us not to do so? What's happening to us? Because, you know, it's not every time Allah warns us of something spiritual, it's not just spiritual, it's also a physical ramification. It's also a mental and emotional ramification. We don't even know all that it is. So what is it? So I'm scared of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, one of the sections we're going to do is parenting. So I don't want to get much into that.
Yeah.
But, you know, as far as just that continuous development of oneself, you know, when we first were thinking about the idea of getting married, you know, our premarital counselor, he was just like, the concept of coming together to form one is not real. Right. You have to continuously understand that you are an individual and you're an individual. You're coming together to work together. Right. And so,
and you know, I didn't really understand what he meant for real until probably about 7 years later. It took me a minute.
Yeah. And so, like, how important do you feel like that continuous self-development in the midst of living life, right? How important really is that?
Bro, it's everything. It's everything. I mean, I'm saying and I'm still evolving to understand that, but it's everything. And it's something that, you know what I'm saying? I was literally just having a talk with my brother, my friend the other day. And one of the things I was telling him is, especially the media assault, especially on men, is that the way they're getting us is to try to make it easy for us to find a way to cop out. So I like a sports analogy, man, where I like a sports analogy. Like, you know, when we play ball, you know what I'm saying? When we really was trying to play and be better, we practice every day. You know what I'm saying? We had coaches who would yell at us and we would take it because we wanted to get better. Right. We would be okay with the criticism.
Yeah.
We gained tough skin. You know what I'm saying? Because we had a goal. We wanted to win whatever championship we was trying to go after, right? Mm-hmm. We're on a team. And that should be life. Like, really, like, to be honest, like Shaitan, like literally Allah has laid out the plan of Shaitan. And Shaitan's whole goal is to get us to give up. Give up on life, on getting back to him with life.
Yep.
Right? So self-development is at every turn, I gotta be better. Like he got me yesterday, just like when we were on the court, and you had a bad game, and you can play better than that.
Right.
And you being hard on yourself, but for some reason, we don't feel like it actually, all life is the same, including our spiritual life. So, and our development, our emotional life is. So I would say it's a lifelong thing.
Yeah.
And the better we are to ourselves, the better we will be to our spouses. The better we are to ourselves, and the better we learn to be to ourselves, the better we can be to whoever we relate to.
Gotcha. What about you? What you think?
It's interesting because clearly we had the same premarital counseling, but I came out of it somehow feeling like I needed to be a part of IU, like almost in a performative way. Like I need to be a good wife, and I need to make sure that he has peace at home, and I need to do all these things for him. But I wasn't a part of the equation. It wasn't I'll do these things for Ayub and then for myself, and then it was just, if I do these things for him, then I'll be okay. If he's good, and we had children very quickly, and the children are okay, I'll be okay. And so it wasn't until I was absolutely exhausted, frustrated, confused, trying to figure out what went wrong, that I was like, oh, I don't do anything for myself. I don't have any hobbies. I don't spend time with my friends. I haven't been to therapy in a long time. I don't go see my sisters. Like, I don't do the things that I did that made me the person that he wanted to marry now that we're married, right? The person that made me somebody who thought I was ready to be whatever. I had stopped doing all those things in the name of being married. And so I started to return to those things. And I remember at one point we sat down because we do like check-ins, kind of like in a business way, like this is not emotional, this is not, but where are we, what's going on, what do we need to be working on? And he said, and we agreed that Saturday mornings from this time to this time would be my time to go do whatever. Because he had that standing appointment Sunday morning, they was playing basketball. And that was over, 10, 12, 15, I don't know how long I've been doing that. 30 years. Like, it's gonna happen forever. And so he was like, maybe a part of the problem is you don't have nothing like that. So go do something like that. And so that's probably around the time that I was like, maybe that is a part of the problem. I'm so consumed with not being myself, but being a mom and a wife, that I've been neglecting being myself. And I was like, this is how women look up and they're like 40 and they're like, where has the time gone? Where's my marriage? Where's my this? Like, I've been a mother and I haven't been much else. And pretty much since then, in one form or another, I've been working on myself. And I remember after my trauma happened, after I was kidnapped, I went to trauma therapy. And that's when I did the really nitty gritty, heavy duty self-work that I really didn't want to do, honestly. I believe I shared this with you, Khalil, not too long ago. Allah had shown me a lot of times in kinder ways things I needed to do, and I didn't do it. And so after that happened, it was such a complete and thorough breaking of everything I had created for myself. The facades and the characters and the performing, everything was gone. And in the process of healing, just to get to some sense of normalcy, I had to go through all this self-work, the healing, the digging out stuff, the traumas. And it just has been the most phenomenal journey coming back to myself. I felt like I don't know who I was showing people for the last 15 years or so. In certain spaces, I've always showed a certain level of a really genuine sense of myself. In my marriage is definitely one of those spaces. And I will often get confused by how people responded to me, because I'm like, what are they talking about, or what are they doing? But now that I've done this work, I'm like, oh, I was doing this. I thought I was doing that, but I was doing this. They were responding to this. They weren't responding to what was in me. They were responding to what I showed them. And so now that I've done all this therapy and I see things from such a different point of view, not now, about 2 years ago when I had really gotten into it, I remember sitting down with him like, you got to do some therapy too. Like, yeah, you didn't get kidnapped, but you were traumatized by that and other traumas. And I'm worried that I'm going to outpace you with this self-work that I'm doing. And so alhamdulillah, he started doing it. And so we didn't do it together. We've done some therapy together, but this wasn't us therapy. This was us therapy, you know, as individuals. And it has been, I don't know anything called but a game changer. Like, I don't think that, I mean, it might be a bold statement, but it almost feels like, could we have sustained our marriage if we both done the therapy? At some point, the stuff would have caught up with us. And of course, Allahu Alam, I don't know. But it feels like if something would have had to give eventually, like the trajectory we were on was so similar to what other people do that's not married no more. Or they weren't married for a while and then they got back together. And then they was married, and then they was, you know, that back and forth thing that people do, or they break up and they marry a bunch of other people for a while, and then they, and all of that stuff is not good for yourself. Let alone the effects it has on your children and your community and your family and all that. But just as an individual, all that marriage and divorce, it'll do something to you and to your spirit. And just one last thing before I pass it to you. Something that you were saying made me think about this thing I learned, this frog in a beaker experiment. I think I learned about this maybe about 20 years ago. It was in a science class. I'm saying they took a frog and they put it into a beaker of hot water, and the frog jumped out immediately. Then they took the frog and put it into tepid water and put water on a Bunsen burner and turned it up very slowly. And eventually the water got to that initial temperature and the frog stayed in there and it died, right? And so the idea is you got to jump out, or you get into that cool water and you slowly heats. Eventually you chilling in what you were so adamantly opposed to at first. And then something in you is going to die. Like something dies in that process. And so I think about that even in terms of like the way that we expose ourselves to things, the way that we don't heal from things, the way that we treat ourselves or mistreat ourselves or take care of ourselves or don't take care of ourselves. I think about all of that. And I also think I have an obligation to myself for other people. Like all these little eyes is looking at me, taking care of myself. I don't want him to have to bathe me in 20 years. You know what I mean? Like, I'm interested in that life. I have to take care of myself as a courtesy to myself and him and my children. And, you know, it keeps going and going.
Yeah, definitely. I want to, you know, turn it over to you. What kind of questions do you have as far as maybe for us in terms of this idea of oneself in the evolution of a family in Islam, like, because it definitely starts there. You know, someone has to make that decision. Like I remember one cook bar before I got married that was very significant that I listened to over and over and over again was, would you marry you? Would you, you know what I'm saying? Would you that? I mean, that was like, whoa, you know what I mean? And so what questions, you know, this conversation has come up for you that you might have for us?
You know what? I was just actually thinking of something when you, I would, you know, actually, so, you know, I know for men, and I want to ask you something, Ayub, because I actually think that, you know, one of the things that's happening in America as I kind of watch the climate is that there's a lot of push now for self-work, but in the single sphere, especially for women, right? Especially for women, right? But and almost the only push for self-work for men is being single. You know, they don't have a lot of push for self-work really for both parties being married. But in what I've come to understand is that you need the same amount whether you're married or not, and actually marriage actually helps you facilitate your self-work as opposed to what we've done is we've juxtaposed, you know what I mean, the two, where it's like you can't do self-work when you're with someone, but you can when you aren't. Right? So let me ask you, actually both of you, actually, what are some of the actually you kind of answered the question when you talked about how you mentioned, well, you need to do something on Saturday. Right. So what are some of the other things that you all suggest when it comes to helping one spouse helping the other to do the self-work?
I think for me, and you kind of touched on it before when you were talking about, you know, just that aspect of being able to listen, right? Being able to really listen to the needs of one, yourself, and then in our situation, my spouse. right? And really giving them space to be who they want to be, right? Really believing in them to be able to be who they want to be, right? Even though sometimes it made me scratch my head, Khalil. Sure you want to go do that? Okay, all right, you know what I mean?
I'm like, yeah, man, come on.
And just really, it's how can I say it? It's like you have to be selfless.
Yes.
You know, like you have to have a certain level of humbleness and humility about yourself to care for others, right? And I think that that's one of the things that has helped because we're both helpful to others individually, right? So then when we come together, it's like, okay, we have to be that for each other. You know what I mean? We have to be that for each other. Otherwise, it's going to drive us crazy because that's innately who we are. You know, and so you're saying that in my house, I can't be who I am for my spouse. That's not going to work out. It's going to be an imbalance, right? It's going to be an imbalance. And so I think that the idea of giving each other space to really be like, on the outside looking in, I reflect sometimes the idea of me traveling across the country to go play basketball for fun, right?
Yes.
Sometimes it's prizes, right? But for fun, right?
Yeah.
Money at my house, taking time away from my family.
Yeah.
And she allowed me to do that.
Yes, Paul.
Wow, he's grown.
I'm not allowed.
I just messaged
where, you know, I have a running joke, right? I got to give my listeners. But you know, to really be okay with that, you know what I'm saying? And you know, recently she took a trip across Europe, and it was just like, no, go do that. You know,
yes.
You know, she was able to do it. You know, and then it was like, yeah, I wanted to be with her, but it's like, nah, she wanted to go do that. You know. And so just really understanding that you have to be able to give people space to be themselves. As long as it's good, right?
Yeah.
As long as it's good.
Yeah.
Right. If it's something outside of that person's character, you have to be able to say, you know, this isn't gonna work, you know, kind of situation.
Yeah. Is there anything, and I just gave you an example for me, and then maybe you can have something. Is there anything that you learned that you had to unlearn from your parents? So like, for example, when I grew up, honestly, I grew up until about 18. My parents were together and they divorced at 18. But when they were together, they argued and yelled a lot, like so much, right? And I wish they were divorced 10 years before they got divorced, to be honest, because it was traumatic for me. I didn't know it was traumatic at the time. I didn't know what trauma was and all that stuff. But now I know, right? But yeah. But what I remember, and for me, it wasn't learning to do what they did. It was, I first started out like, I'm going to be the opposite of them.
Right.
I'm never going to do what they do. But the problem is it turned into me not expressing myself when I needed to, because I was like, in the name of keeping the peace, you know what I'm saying? I ended up and then I had to learn to come back to balance, right? But sometimes it's good to be able to say that. What did y'all experience anything like that?
I think most of mine came up in parenting more than marriage or by myself. I think mine was more in parenting.
For me, you know, I had a great example of my father, right? From my eyes, right? My eyes. And I had to look at it from an adult's perspective and create a different balance than I felt like he had, right? He was a family man, he was a businessman, he was a community man, right?
Yeah.
But the amount of time that I can remember him in the house actually doing things for the house was very minimal.
Yeah.
Right? Not to say that he didn't, because again, I'm looking at it from a child's eye, right?
Yeah.
And so I said that, you know, looking at it from my children's eye, what do I want them to see, right? And so I began to do things in the house that I didn't see him do necessarily.
Oh, okay.
And understand that I used to hear different things as far as not being helped in the house and things like that from different women, right?
Yeah.
And it was just like, I can't have my wife going. So it was something that I had
can't.
Right? It was something that I had to do for me, right? To be okay with that. Because like I tell my children, you're going to do certain things regardless, right? You might as well get the blessings in it by doing it with a positive attitude.
Yeah.
And, with a positive frame of mind versus I don't really want to do this and I'm just doing it because she want me to do it and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a development that I had to go through to kind of get myself in a place where this is what I wanted to do. She never forced me to. She never, anything like that. This was something that I wanted to do for myself. And so I think that was one of the biggest for me that I had to not necessarily unlearn, but look at what I had growing up and look at what I wanted my life to be like in that stage.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, because I was listening to him and thinking about an answer not from a parenting point of view, but from an individual point of view. Mm-hmm. And it dawned on me that I was always surrounded by exceedingly strong women, like strong beyond what a woman is supposed to be in terms of strength. Like they just did. They moved, they kept moving, nothing is stopping them. They go and and I'm not talking about single women necessarily. Like many times they were married or widowed or sometimes divorced, but they were just super strong. Godmothers, teachers, mom, women in the community, whatever. They were just super, super strong. Mm-hmm. I think I did not learn, at least not for me, a good definition of strength. I saw it as not needing help. And it doesn't mean that they didn't get help. Like you said, from a church, I was a child. So they may have very well gotten help from each other and just didn't show us any of those vulnerable moments. But because I saw being strong as not showing weakness, not needing help, not having those soft moments, not showing emotion, just this really rigid picture of strength, that was kind of what I sought to be in terms of being strong. Until I realized that not only was it not working, it was kind of dangerous, and it wasn't allowing me to be the good wife that I wanted to be or the good mom that I wanted to be. And I started to research things and learn more about like development and strength and mental illness and all these things. And I remember I came across this lecture on vulnerability and how strong you have to be vulnerable, to allow somebody to see inside and to expose yourself and to take that risk. And I used to see vulnerability almost as weakness, like you just going, like kind of like come on, like stand up straight. Like what are you doing? Like don't embarrass yourself. And sometimes I just like scoff at myself at the way that I used to see things. Sometimes it was such a black and white. Like there was no gray, there was no pink, there was no blue, no red. It was just black and white. And now it's such a different thing for me. And I find myself trying to share that. Like I felt like I was emancipated when I learned how to be vulnerable and ask for help. And I saw strength in relying on people around me and sharing my trouble stories. People always say, people don't ever tell you about their failures. Yeah, some of us do. Because we know that that's a part of what needs to be heard. A lot of times people will, I don't know, they seem like surprised. Like when I'm in women's spaces and they say, you had to do this. I'm like, yo, I'm a person. Right. Yeah, I've had this issue. I've had this struggle. And then I realized I was contributing to that false narrative of what strength looks like. What does it look like to be successful, even in these community ways? And it's dangerous. People burn themselves out. They run themselves into the ground. They destroy really good things in the name of building because they're being strong in the wrong ways. And so that's probably one of the bigger ones. And nobody ever said these things, right? Like it wasn't a verbal message directly to me, but I'm sure I heard conversations around and I know what I saw. Even to the point of, I remember one time my cousin was in a really, really bad accident. And my aunt, who was a doctor, was the only doctor around. Didn't get to be a mom or aunt. She had to be a doctor. You know what I mean? Like she had to do a superhuman thing and take care of her dying child because there was nobody else to do it. So it's like, I didn't see that from the real strength point of it. I saw it as, oh, auntie is, her emotion, she doesn't have emotions about this. Not she had to get control of her emotions, because then people aren't really talking to us about it. We're just seeing things. And so, and And I used to think, why didn't they talk to us about that? Well, some stuff you don't talk to children about. Like even now, I think there are some things that you don't necessarily talk to children about. And so it's so that whole idea of like what strength truly is something that I have definitely developed a different understanding of from I think it was mostly I would say from my parents, because I think that I have very strong parents, but also my dad is in his 70s and my mom is in her 60s. So they're a bit older compared to some other parents in my age range, especially my dad. And they're old fashioned, you know, they're old fashioned, old fashioned parents.
Yeah.
So it was a different way of things.
And old fashioned really means what? Don't show no vulnerability. You're
not showing it. And really it makes sense because of the weakness that perceived weakness that would have been preyed on in their time. They didn't have space to have those moments. They didn't have the luxury of having this established community that's been around for X amount of time where your children can they built that stuff, right? Like they're the ones that created these spaces for us. And so now here we are, and we have the luxury and the privilege of being able to have a different understanding of strength and to show vulnerability and to look at ego differently and to go to therapy. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't the same for our parents.
I want to add to that because I think that was the one thing that I always tell people. I mean, I always tell myself, you know, when I think about my dad, you know, who we had a very interesting relationship. I love him. He taught me most of what I know, but at the same time, I think my dad sacrificed our friendship to raise me. I always say that, like he sacrificed our friendship to raise me, meaning it's kind of like that movie Fences. Like, nah, dude, we listen. You got to toughen up. You know, and it was good. Actually, it wasn't all bad. I needed a lot of it, but then there were times where I needed to be able to actually be vulnerable. I actually think that, and trying to come to balance, you know, because I never, you know, as a young person, I don't think I ever saw like my father emotionally hurt or show it. I never saw him show it. I know now that he was, because he's mellowed. You know, now he's mellowed. I've seen a little bit, but when I was younger, I didn't know it was there. Yeah. Right. And so I try to show my children that a little bit. I try to apologize to my children if I did something wrong. I try to show them actual emotion, all that stuff to balance. And I got daughters. And at the end of the day, so it's different because if I had a son, I would be a little bit more like my dad with my son. I wouldn't be totally like him. I'd try to have a little more balance. But like you said, it's because you know he did what he had to do, and how he was raised. He was a street dude, so he was raised that way. So he just did what was in his capacity. Yeah. But I think that to us today, we had a strike. It's a hard balance to strike, especially. And so I want to actually ask you this too, because you know, for me, actually, when I read, and I like to read a lot about the Sahaba as the greatest examples, Sahaba and the Prophet as the greatest example. One of the things I read about them is that they were the strongest people and it was extremely vulnerable.
Yes.
That's what I loved about their balance. Like they were the strongest people, but they would cry in front of each other. They would plead, and the way they complained was very authentic. They would be like, man, you hurt me. Like, you know, Abu Dhar and Bilal, like, you know, this hurt. And Abu Dhar was like, you know, put it to the point with I think he kissed his feet or something like that. That's how much Abu Dhar was like, nah, I'm not trying. But in the next minute, they was warriors on the battlefield, so there wasn't nobody stronger than them, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm trying to be like, actually. You know what I mean? That's actually what I'm trying to be like. Why? Because I actually believe that I've learned that there's so much strength, like you said, there's strength and vulnerability. And this is actually the one point I will say I want to add with respect to marriage, where there's sometimes where I do think, I will say that sometimes people, in order to be authentic and vulnerable, I think you actually have to protect your vulnerability so much that if somebody's not going to let you be vulnerable in your space, you have to go. Because you actually will sacrifice yourself. Like you cannot actually, your vulnerability is connected to your sincerity, right? Yeah. If you ever get to the point where you literally are strategizing just to be yourself, or you're literally plotting on the one you're supposed to lay next to just to be yourself, it's time to go.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of that going. You know, there's a lot of that go. And I think that's the one thing where if you are trying and you go all out and you get divorced, it sometimes it can be a good thing. You know, it's not a bad. It's a good thing. You actually end up growing from that. You know, I think the bad divorces are when you didn't do what you you know you didn't do enough,
Right.
and you regret, and then that kills you, and then that's what leads on to the next thing. But vulnerability. Like, tell me about like how you frame it. Like, what do you feel about it?
I mean, vulnerability is like, for me, it's like really stepping outside of yourself and what's in the best interest for the collective, right? And not having this self-egotistical approach that I'm not happy, so I want to change the situation, right? And it's like, that's not necessarily always the best posture to have, because especially when you're in group settings, it's like you have to take into account everybody who's involved, right? It's not about you. It's not about you. And so, there are going to be disagreements. We're not going to always agree. We're not going to always see eye to eye. But to be able to continue to move forward in a collective good, I think, is what I have wanted to stand on since I've been involved in teamwork, community work. Yep. I had basketball teams, man, where we had great teams, and it was players that did not get along. They did not get along. But I had to be in the middle, right? Have this middle ground to be able to bring people back together for this greater good, for us to be successful on the basketball court. You know what I mean? And to understand that the person that's not saying anything, right? The point guard ain't saying nothing, right? He's controlling the whole dynamic of the team. How do I get him to still play in, you know what I mean, to these people who's beefing, and get them involved, and get them to pass each other the ball? And so I think that for me, sports has been a good, a great thing for me personally. Yeah. To not always be the best player on the court or on the field, but always be the leader. To always be the team captain. And sometimes it was like, it took me a while to get used to being chosen as the leader or the captain, because I never raised my hand like, I want to be the captain. It was always, who do y'all think should be the leader or the captain? And it took me a while to really accept it. You know what I mean? Because I still fully don't grasp it about myself. I really don't. But it took me a while to accept it, and I think that for me, just having that level of vulnerability that, it's not about me, you know what I'm saying? And
so when is it about you though? Because sometimes it has to be. So how does Don Corleone, how do you take care of self?
I'll give you a perfect example, right? Yeah. And I'm ignoring that comment. To give you an example, right? There have been times where, I've been in a position of leadership or authority, and when I make a suggestion, right? I make a suggestion and it's not necessarily taken, right? And I can't add positive value to it, then I have to remove myself. That's when I have to protect myself, right? Because in daily, I'm trying to keep everything, because like I say, anything can grow out of positivity. Nothing can grow out of negativity. Everything comes out of negativity, right? And so if it gets to a point where me being who I am is not influencing it in a positive manner, not in the way that I want it to go,
got you,
in a positive manner, then I have to remove myself, because I'm going to be uncomfortable and feeling like I'm getting pulled to do something in a negative way. And that's not my innate nature. You know what I mean? And so that's where I kind of look into myself. And I have people I bounce things off of course, you know what I mean? But that's when it's like, okay, I can't step out of character. I can't step out of who I really want to be and who I am and who I've grown to be. So I have to just remove myself. Then come back. You know what I mean? And then come back.
My wife was always better than me.
I've never closed the door. I've never closed the door.
Yeah.
You know,
I always say my wife was better than me at that. Like her ability to remove herself. Like we can learn from our. If we really look at it, we can learn from our spouse because each one has a strength. And you be like, you know what, you do that better than me. Like you can bounce out of a situation just like that and really know how to take care of yourself that way. And sometimes I'm confused about that. I don't have the same. I didn't have the same sense to that. You know, so I probably learned more about that from her. But I want to. So here's a question and juxtaposing I can give to you, Ndola, too. And you can maybe even start, is that what I see, and maybe you can even differ in this. What I see now, though, in society and the trend of society, is there's a lot of support for the woman being herself now, right? And it's also, but in the process, it's almost like in a lot of ways, it also encourages men to forget about themselves. And I also think in doing that, whereas before, maybe even 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was the opposite. It's changed very quickly, right? But in doing that, it actually ends up hurting everyone because he ends up having resentment that you end up feeling as a wife that you don't even know where it's coming from, you know? And so as a person, for example, who is now in your space, how do you help him? You're now, you know, and alhamdulillah, you know, I'm so glad that y'all work it out. Like, you know, you're like, you know, I'm doing this and he's supportive was that's the way it's supposed to be. So how do you actually return the favor?
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that I did that kind of from the jump.
I got you.
And I did it too much, honestly. I did it to my own detriment almost. Like it was like Ayub wants to play basketball and that's what's important. So it doesn't really matter if because I was in grad school when we got married. So it doesn't matter if I got a paper that I need to write, if I got a class I'm about to teach, I'm about to be at the court to support Ayub playing basketball. I didn't need to be there, you know what I mean? But it was like, this is what's the most important thing. And I wouldn't really communicate that I got this reading I need to do, I got this paper I need to work on. And then I got pregnant, however many months after we got married. So that came with its own issues. But again, as long as the baby is okay, and as long as Ayub was okay, and that was the way that I saw it at least. And so I think that he's a very simple person. Like he doesn't like extravagance. He doesn't like excessiveness. It's spaghetti could be for dinner every night with a ginger beer. And you know what I mean? Go play basketball, take a shower, go play tennis, take a shower, get some spaghetti, watch the game. He's good. So I didn't have to try to figure things out. I didn't have to work really hard to say, what do I need to do? What do I need to? It was really kind of clear the things that he wanted to do and the places that he wanted to go. And then professionally, he's been an accountant since we got married. Yeah. And so when it came to things like that, I would encourage him to further his education, to join clubs of accountants. I mean, I don't know the stuff that they do, but I know that they do stuff. So it'd be like, oh, I heard about this group of Black accountants, you know, maybe you should check this out. And so my thing is, I believe that there's more power in choice than people like to say. Yeah. And when we really, really encourage people too much, even though we're not making them do it, you might kind of be taking their choice away. Excessive encouragement, it starts to feel. And so I'm always really, really careful, whether I've succeeded or not. I've always been careful about not doing that, not saying 30 times, you should really take this class. Or am I telling you without telling you? You know what I mean? Like, it's not my child. I'm not here to tell him what to do. I'm here to supplement, to be along for, so forth and so on. And so it was important to me to support the stuff that he wanted to do. And like he said, some of the stuff that I wanted to do, it wasn't so consistent. It wasn't so expected. But he definitely, in the head scratching, would be like, well, what you need me to do for that? So, you know, I wasn't as steady, you know. It was steady to me because I know me, you know. I'm an artist, he's not. The other artists, I haven't done anything that's outside of what you would expect to see. Because he's not an artist. He's like, what in the world is happening right now? But jokes on him, we now have 3 children who are artists. And so he's had to learn a lot more about what this looks like. And so I find that I try to keep an encouraging position every so often, we've been married for what, 14 years? I would say maybe 3 times, maybe twice. I took a much more firm, like, look, you need to, like, it was kind of that more tough love, kind of get up and do what you're saying you want to do this, so go do this, instead of, what do you think? Da, da, da. And so it was a much harsher, but it was because he just kept saying this thing. And I was like, bruh, like, what is stopping you? Like, literally nothing. I'm here saying I'll pick up whatever slack there'll be from you being in class. I'm saying that the money that's coming from school can supplement whatever bill that we get paid from reduced hours. Like, what is the problem? And so, so they weren't intense moments. They weren't like heated arguments. It wasn't nothing like that, but just a different approach to it. So I would go between that, in my mind, more suggestive, kind of make it so that there would be nothing stopping him from being able to do the things he wants to do. So he may not have said, I want to do this thing on Thursday, but I knew that if all these things were done in the house with the girls, with their homework, with myself, then he wouldn't come in and say, oh man, this is a mess, dinner isn't made, I can't go do this thing. And so I wouldn't always communicate that, because I feel like everything doesn't need to be said in a relationship. Sometimes you need to do things. I think that sometimes it's a sign of being a poor friend if your friend always has to ask you for stuff. Like, sometimes you know your friend's needs. You need to offer, like, just put it out there, and they take it or they won't. So if he comes in and says, oh, wow, I didn't know there's laundry needed to get done, let me get this stuff, and I say, yeah, come on, then come on and help me. But more often than not, I would try to have it done before he came in, so it wouldn't be a thing. Yeah. Or if I didn't get to it and he came in and saw that, I would say, no, don't worry about it, I got it.
Right.
So that was kind of my way of trying to make sure there weren't things stopping him from pursuing things, and being able to just kind of move how he wanted to move, and just continue to grow and build as an individual and do the things he wanted to do, even to the point of when, what was that, about 5 years ago, he got a promotion and his job moved him to Texas. And so he moved to Texas and we were still in Georgia.
Oh,
and
wow.
Like, man, I didn't know it was going to be like this, but I'm going to make it work, he's climbing the corporate ladder. We went and we picked out an apartment, and I started buying furniture, and we're about to relocate to Texas. And I had no interest in living in Texas. I didn't know anybody in Texas. Texas is big and it's hot, and I didn't want to be in Texas. But my husband needed to go to Texas, so we're gonna go to Texas. You know what I mean? And I feel like I did too much of that.
Too much of that, right?
Not that I had too much support. I didn't communicate my needs in the process. I should have done both.
That's that's actually, and it's good that you are taking ownership of that, right? Because a lot of times people don't. Like, a lot of times people make that, okay, well, you should have known, and it's like, and I mean, even like I do want to get to, because there's a person who asked a question. So does women seeking happiness encourage men to forget about themselves, or to reevaluate the boundaries of their egos and expectations in their relationships, and choose to align their actions closer to their values? This is a question. Actually, I wanted to jump on that, because I'm just like, one, I think that actually, and we have a good example in them, if you didn't see the earlier part, in that these are two people who both said that they encourage themselves to see. So basically what it looks like, as soon as you became aware that the other person needed to seek a certain thing, you said, I'm going to assist you. Right. And that's the dopest thing. Honestly, like, to me, that's what should happen. Right.
You might not say it.
Right.
You might do things to put this stuff in place, but I think we got to a point where we say it more now.
And that's actually, I think that's important too, actually, to say, to articulate, hey, you know what, I am doing this, because I always tell people marriage is always as a constant negotiation. It's a constant negotiation. I think it's going to be a negotiation until you die. That's just one of the things that happens when you're in any type of relationship. It's a constant negotiation, right? Between two people. Right. Not, I gotta have my way, only my way, and I gotta have my. It's a negotiation between two people. So, when I see this question, it's like, no, I think Ayub actually also answered it as well. It's like, no, actually, I was looking at my ego, and I'm like, this actually helps my ego to help, and to take that challenge, like, because that, take that challenge, hey, you know what? And even just saying like, I don't understand what's happening here. I don't understand what you really want, but how do I help?
How do I help?
It's a great exercise because, I can't see, because it's one thing to know something's wrong. It's another thing to be like, okay, I don't understand, but I don't see anything wrong. So, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to actually just dead it just because.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people, that's what they do. If I can't see it, it can't happen.
Right.
Or if I agree with it, it's irrelevant.
Right. And if I don't agree with it, it's irrelevant. Exactly. If I don't agree with it, it's only my world, in that way. So I think to answer the question, I would say actually listen to this and listen to it from the beginning, because I think you actually see an example of two people. And I would actually say this, because nobody's gonna get it perfect, but who actually want to see the other person happy just as much as you want to see yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest. I actually enjoy seeing you good.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I see Ayub and I see Ndola, and I see two people who y'all enjoy seeing the other person. I might not understand why, but I know you're good, so I'm happy. You know what I mean? Like that's you know what I mean? And that's that without forgetting yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the negotiation. That's the negotiation. Because you change. Like people change, right? Like what I wanted at 25 is different, right?
So much change.
Right.
So much change. And a part of why it's more of a verbal exchange now is because of therapy. Like one of the things that came up in the last time I went to therapy was that you have to say things. Things have to be said. And I knew that a lot of the stuff that maybe was missed between us was because of ineffective communication, but I was unaware of how much of it was my ineffective communication. Because we talk all the time. Like I said, we do these actual deliberate check-ins, and we do it with the girls, and we do it with ourselves, and we do it with each other again, and we do it for marriage, and then for the businesses, and then for the parenting, and then for our families, and it's so much talking. But in the midst of all of that communicating, I wasn't communicating certain things, and sometimes he didn't communicate certain things. And so when things were off, neither of us understood why, because there was so much communication that happened. And that's one of those benefits of having a therapist, a counselor, a mediator, a friend, whoever, to just kind of listen, evaluate, see things that both of you might be missing, and just give you some tips and some pointers. And I know at one point, it was one of the therapies that we was doing, was that 2 years ago now? And there was a session on vulnerability and ego, and shame came up. And shame was one of the bigger things that was happening with us as individuals. I would maybe a little bit more for him than for me, but it was definitely present for both of us. We're handling it in different ways. And the way that it was explained to us was that shame is not really a righteous thing more often than not. It's usually an ego thing that is masked in righteousness, and things fall apart because of shame and ego. You know what I mean? It's like this whole spiraling loop that you can be on. And so it was a big eye opener for me, because I had always thought of shame as this good thing, kind of like, what's that? That saying, if you feel no shame, then you should do as you please. So it's like, shame. We're supposed to be ashamed of stuff, but we're just taking it totally out of context, I think. Because there is a place for a certain type of shame. Yeah. It's an ego-based shame, a shame that's stopping you from doing certain things, and it's not even grounded in anything righteous. It's terrible.
It becomes toxic. It'll literally kill you. It can kill you. And I would gather, if you don't end up killing yourself through stress, you're going to hurt the other person, because you're going to end up blaming everybody else for what you're ashamed of.
There it is.
You know what I mean? Because the body has like a protection mechanism where, like, at some point you're going to shut down from getting on yourself. You're going to be like, you're the reason for this. And without realizing you're doing it, that's what you're going to end up acting like. You're the reason why I feel this way about myself. You know what I mean? You can't do that, right?
I'm telling you, it's amazing to me the amount of things that I've learned about myself in the last 3 years versus the 34 before it. Like, it's unbelievable. It reminds me of like the technology boom, like how you can human information into this much of a line, and then after technology, the line is like that.
Yeah.
It feels like that. And but it also is a very active thing. Like, I'm not chilling meditating, taking baths, burning incense. Like it's been retreat and therapy and marriage therapy and individual counseling and going away for 2 weeks to Europe. Like I didn't want to be away from my family for 2 weeks. Actually, it was closer to 3.
Right.
I had never been away from my children for 3 weeks. Never been away from him for 3 weeks, except, no, that's not true, Texas.
Yeah.
When he was in Texas, we would do 3 or 4 weeks at a time. But I had never been away from my children for more than a night or 2. And so now I'm in this place where I'm having to focus on myself. I have to do what I need to do for me, make sure they're good. And now I'm focused on me. And that trip it didn't feel so necessary. It felt kind of like an extra thing. But while I was on it, I started to see why it was necessary. Like it was a part of my healing that first year. And then even just being back, like sometimes we will be like, we're going to do something just the 2 of us. Or you do something just you. I don't need to be there. What's our budget for our individual thing? And just don't blow the budget. But you want to do a staycation. You want to go away. You want to do whatever. You have to do these things for yourself. And I think that since after I did that trauma therapy and then he started doing his therapy, then we got the girls in therapy and all of this therapy going on, all these different things happening, everybody got a better understanding of who we are and what we have to do for ourselves. And it makes it easier because if I'm doing all this stuff, learning all this stuff, and it's like, okay, I need to do this, and he doesn't have an understanding of that, it could have been really problematic. But because it was kind of already a part of what we were doing, we're just learning better ways. It made it better for us to really focus on ourselves without it being something that will make us, tear us apart or tear us away from our children or from our family. And a lot of times I would hear people say things might come up in therapy that might cause a rift in the family. But all of the things that I've kind of gone through has made me understand my family even better. Even the stuff I don't like, even the stuff that I would have rather done without. It's like, I can at least see what was happening there. I have, if not understanding, empathy.
Right.
I think that comes from a desire to actually want to be better. I think that, you have 2 people who have a desire to want to be better. That's not always the case. Some people go because they want their problems to be fixed as opposed to to learn about them and then learn that they have to fix them themselves. People are looking for a quick fix, you know what I mean? And that's what happens and why sometimes people go to therapy and they, and they're like, oh, no, because it's like, no, you still have to do the work. The therapist is just going to show you how to do the work, and show you where you need to do the work. It's like, you know what I'm saying? Because you don't know that it's there. I wanted to ask you. You see, y'all asked me to ask questions. I got questions up there. So you can let me know when it's time. Right? You can let me know when it's time, because I can go. But the shame thing was, I said, it caught my attention because one of the things I believe about men that's actually killing. That's like, and this, I'm actually talking about men who actually are striving hard. Every man who I know striving hard, we put so much pressure on ourselves. And we put pressure on ourselves to win for our family. We put pressure on ourselves. It's just something that's in us when we're actually striving. And what are the things that you do actually to deal with that? Because I think actually this is one of those things where if men can solve the shame issue, we will actually help our relationship with ourselves, number one, but then with the significant other, because we're actually putting that pressure on everybody else because we feel like we haven't done enough. So what are the things that you've actually learned and been doing as a result of understanding that that's what's going on? And sometimes have you even learned that shame you didn't need to have it for this case because you were doing the best you could? Like, talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it kind of just goes back to really having open dialogue. And like she said, we talk a lot, but it's like, what are you really talking about, right? And so to those times where it was just like, okay, I need to let you know what's going on with me, right?
Yeah.
And then having somebody who has grown to show you that they care, right?
Yeah.
To be able to do that. And then for them to be able to recognize and remind you of those things that help you through those processes, right? So there's been times where she say, you know what? You need to just go for a run.
Don't help me with nothing.
Right? Because physically sweating and letting that energy off for me is something that's therapeutic. Yeah, it's therapeutic.
But he won't do it in the name of I gotta do this,
I got it.
that,
Right.
and I gotta, and I'm
Right.
like, what you gotta do is
Right.
go for a run and
Right.
don't come back in less than 30 minutes
Right.
or less than 5 miles.
Right.
Don't come back.
Right.
Go.
And so, just having, I guess that's part of that longevity piece of somebody who's growing with you, to be able to see yourself from a different perspective, right? To be able to help you to basically put your plan together, your self-care plan. What's your self-care plan? Mine is involving physical exertion, some good food, the beach, you know what I'm saying? And spending time with my children, you know what I mean? And just having the wherewithal and to be able to understand that's what I need.
Yeah.
Like she said, I'm pretty simple. You know what I mean?
He's a simple guy. Very consistent.
I don't need a lot. I wear the same pair of shoes. I'll buy the same pair of shoes for 10 years.
Buy it over. Sir, get a different color shoes.
But yeah, just having essentially figuring out what that self-care plan is, right? So I thought at one point it was basketball, right? But it's not necessarily basketball, it's the physical exertion.
Physical exertion, yeah.
You know what I mean? So I do the jump rope challenge. I'm now playing tennis, I go running, you know what I mean? So it's
cycling.
Is identify what is that self-care plan, you know what I'm saying? For you, not for the family.
Yep.
Not for us as a married couple, but for you, because
not even for your team.
Right.
Because that was a big thing that he did. The Adios need this, and my team.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
What do you?
Yeah.
You have to put yourself first here.
Mm-hmm.
It's about you.
Yeah.
And the idea that being selfish is bad. Sometimes you gotta be selfish.
Exactly. Yeah, that reminds me of the cave, the Prophet Sallallahu going to his cave. And then that's to go into his cave. And one of the things I started doing actually was, every once in a while, just I'm going to go stay in a place by myself and just pray and reflect 2 days, something like that. Just because I have to have it. Because for me, being an entrepreneur, I literally work almost 24/7.
Right.
I work 7. You know what I'm saying? 7 days a week, almost 20. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, and it's such a grind. And then after that, and then like you say, always worrying about making sure that your family, that your kids are good, looking at the psychological well-being of that. And it's helped me to just being able to, and I appreciate being allowed, like you said. When we say allowed, we're actually saying, well, we're not getting like the static where it's like, where you're made to feel bad or guilty for that. I think it's so big. And this is what I'm saying I love. And if I take something out of both of you all, is that I love that you all have the willingness to try to not make each other feel guilty and to want each other, right? To actually have the space you need. And I actually think that makes you want more to be good to each other. When you see when somebody else gives you space, you like, I'm gonna make sure you good because I appreciate the fact that you did that for me.
Right, straight up.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So I love that. That's all I'm. That's I know it's been an hour and 33 minutes. So
I was looking at
I will
let y'all. We appreciate it, man. I think that we this is going to be impactful. I'm looking at the people who are watching and commenting, and it's not just the thing that a lot of people don't understand about Islam, right? Is that it's a humanity thing. It's not just for Muslims, right? The information that we're talking about is not just for Muslims. It's for people who want to do godly works, right? Who want to do righteous deeds, right? Who want to join together in the mutual teachings, right? And just looking at the people that we've been able to interact with and touch, man, it's really inspiring in a way to keep going, because a lot of times we're new to this, right? We're new to this, but it's like we feel like we have a lot to give, a lot of light to shine. Right now, it's a lot of negativity in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And we feel like it's a lot of light to shine that we have. And so it's like, okay, let's do it. You know what I mean? Even if we affect, 10 people, right? That's 10 people who are getting some impactful light, right? That kind of nourishes the soul a little bit, kind of helps the brain stimulate in a different way other than just scrolling through an Instagram feed, and alhamdulillah, man, I think that this is a great start to this month, in preparation to be able to get us ready for Ramadan, because Ramadan is going, last year was different. This is gonna be even more different.
Yeah.
Last year was like, okay, this is new, it's kind of fun, but now it's like, oh man, I remember what last year was like.
Yeah.
So, alhamdulillah, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
That's my last comment.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've just been thinking of the more that I've been reflecting on, thinking about the conversation today, the more I feel like this isn't a one-timer, a one-time conversation. It's like the kind of thing that has to continue to happen over and over and over, because even though the series that we've put together, it goes through these different stages, oneself is at the center of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage, and then parenting, and then community, and then legacy. But you got to maintain yourself for all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's the easiest one to neglect, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
The easiest one to kind of fall by the wayside, the easiest one to not serve well. And it just dawned on me that even this, what we're doing, came out of him encouraging me to do this.
Mashallah.
I was in grad school, and I had to give a presentation, and it was one of the large classrooms. Georgia State doesn't have a lot of those really big classrooms that we maxed out about 250 capacity. And I did one in those big rooms, and I was terrified, hot, sweating, butterflies. But once I got going, I was like, oh snap, I think this is it. This is what I loved it. I was like, oh, it was great. I got good feedback. I love doing it. I did some more classes, and he was like, you should be a speaker. No. And I graduated from grad school. A
little while ago.
Since I graduated from grad school. And so I remember at one point he even was like, look, I found this website, I found this thing, I signed you up. This is what you need to do. And I was like, all right, fine.
Yeah.
And so just the ways that it's necessary to give that push sometimes, to let people do what's best for themselves. It's really, really crucial. And so I appreciate it.
That's where it's at, man. That's why that's where it's at. I think that's one of the biggest keys is wanting each other's success. Like, and if you, to the point when you get to the point where you're competing against each other. I actually Masood, who's been on here, yeah. What he actually said, competing to outdo each other in kind gestures is where it's at. I like that statement. Yeah.
Shouts out to him. He did a heck of a thing last month.
Did he? SubhanAllah. Right.
Yeah.
That was big.
Right. Yeah.
If anybody didn't know, Masood Abdul Haq, look him up on Facebook.
Right.
He did a post every day in the month of February.
The Giants in our midst.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Right. Just giving back. Say again.
It was just a beautiful testimony, or not testimony. What's the word?
Recognition.
It's all the words.
Yeah.
It was really a beautiful thing that he put together. And so, it was Black History in the Making, Giants in our midst. Our brother K.I. was on there. My brother Ayub.
Ayub was, right?
Yeah,
it was a beautiful thing. So, it's something that we have to keep doing. We have to keep competing with each other and doing kindness,
righteousness and kindness.
And building ourselves. I've never had a huge audience, but like you said, sometimes it's just that 10 people, that 2 people, that 1 person. I find that even in these intimate spaces, when we have the opportunity to get in front of somebody and just share these little pieces of our stories and things that we've learned, it really can be a real game changer for somebody. And so, inshallah, anybody that learns something, y'all get it. We get it.
Right.
Whoever taught us, get some of that. These benefits keep flowing, and we can just keep building on this thing. But I guess I'll pass it on to you for any final thoughts or final words.
No, just I really appreciate y'all having me on, inshallah. Working on some stuff, so hopefully we can work together on this type of thing about even pushing it more. I remember when I remember the first time I think I because I've been playing ball against Ayub since I was a teenager, right? In the Riyadas and stuff. But when we actually really connected, I think it was at Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And I remember us at Bashir's, and I'll just end with this. Like, I remember at Bashir's place when we were talking, and I remember hearing y'all and be like, you know what? There's some way in which like these 2 really are, impactful. Probably, I don't know. And so when we ended up doing a Riyada, and then of course, facilitating and stuff like that. So dope to actually see so much of this come around, and for us to continue and us to build. You know what I'm saying? We've literally been building. Ayub just like one of my Sahaba now. You know what I mean? He's literally one of my Sahaba now. Like family, feels like family. Like when we did a Riyadh after that, okay, that's my family. That feels like family, right? You know,
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, even though you kind of forced me into it, I was like, yeah, I'm not in it. He was like, yeah, so here's your.
Right. And then you coming on and then working with us with the kids and stuff like that has also been it. So it feels like, and so that's what happens. You see these families, and then family connects and makes a bigger family. And that's what I believe is the key and the answer, is that you see these families and you see the good, and we have to come together and join together and pool our strengths together and become greater families. Because my family was helping at the Riyadh too. You know what I'm saying? And we all brought our families together. And I think doing stuff like that and continuing doing stuff like that, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. So Jazakallah khair. I want to say Jazakallah khair for y'all for, even trusting me, in that place, and trusting me as much as possible, because that brought us closer. You know what I mean? So I just want to say Jazakallah khair for that. And I'm like I said, thank you. Jazakallah khair.
I mean, we definitely appreciate you coming on with us, and we as we mentioned a couple times, that's so sweet. Thank you. That last comment you shared. But we're gonna do 2 sessions on each topic. So Oneself, today we had our brother on Friday. We're gonna have our sister Naila Clay joining us, who I know a lot of people know about. She's amazing. She's an amazing speaker. She's amazing when there's one person around, when nobody around, when there's 100 people around. She's a dynamic speaker. She has a lot of amazing information that we knew would be able to build onto this first conversation that we're having tonight. And so each week we're doing Mondays, essentially like the brother's perspective, and then on Fridays sitting down with women. And so this week is Oneself, and then next week is marriage. And so we want each conversation to kind of build into the next, because for many of us, most of us are married, but even for people who are not married, when you're talking about the importance of the family, somebody is getting married in there, right? So we got the Oneself, and then the marriage, and then from many, if not most marriages, there's parenting. And then after that parenting, or in addition to all of this, we have the community, and then we want to keep these communities strong and legacy. And so it all feels very interconnected. It's like, instead of being a line, it's more of a web, because your Oneself is connected to that community and that legacy. Your parenting is connected to your Oneself and your community, and so forth and so on. And so I don't know if we can name drop quite yet some of the folks that we got lined up, but
we got a lot.
Right. We didn't get too many no's when we reached out to people to come on. There's a few schedule conflicts, but for the most part, we got a lot of yeses, alhamdulillah. And so this month is looking real, real good. And I would definitely love for you to come back on, Khalil. I don't know, we got to look at your schedule, but
hey, man, I mean, anytime.
We got to bring him on.
I really mean it, man. Y'all fam. So, you know what I mean? If you just hit me and let me know what you thinking, and it's the earlier the better, because then I can set the schedule around.
Right.
Whenever, man, I like being in service. I like helping. I like being a help. Whatever y'all need, man. Seriously, whatever y'all need.
Yeah, so we'll be back Friday at 7 p.m. with at least with Naila. We got to check on who else we'll have for our Oneself with our sisters. But any final thing?
Nah, thank you everybody for watching, and be sure to like the Shakur's page and share, and check out some of our other videos. We're working on some stuff, y'all. We're working on some stuff. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Mashallah. May Allah bless y'all.
I mean, you too. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks everybody for joining us.